one, I was just getting ready to make breakfast for everybody, and I was going to make pancakes. And it led me to some things that we've been discussing around our home lately, and I thought I'd go ahead and share it with you. You know, these are some hard times. We haven't seen hard times like this. Our country, our world hasn't seen hard times like this since the Great Depression. And though many people feel that it is not as bad as the Great Depression, there are still many millions of Americans alone out of work, and there are many more millions of Americans whose work has been reduced. So their pay has been reduced prior to when the country closed down earlier this year. So it's important that we discuss the ability to stretch our dollar, to make it last longer than we'd ever considered it lasting before, and especially in this day and age when we are so far removed from the generations that lived through the Depression, that had that wisdom to share. We have to glean through that wisdom again and find it. And so I wanted to share with you some of our things that we do, and I'm going to start it with this particular video with pancakes. Pancakes are an amazing food. If you have not ever made a homemade pancake, I am telling you, you will be so impressed with yourself because it is so much better than anything you can buy in the supermarket. Now, I'm dating myself here back to when I grew up in the 70s and the 80s when I was a young girl. And also because we don't have television and haven't had television since 1993, and we don't watch any commercials. I even remember back in the early 90s, they had like the pre-made pancake batter. So if that's what you're used to, if you run into McDonald's and you buy their hot cakes, I remember they used to sell those years ago, and you could, at their breakfast time. Those are nothing compared to a homemade pancake. The other thing about the homemade pancake is the dollar stretching that it does. You would not believe how many pancakes you could make for you or your family with a 5-pound bag of flour and a gallon of milk. The only other thing you need is a few eggs and baking powder. And then you decide on your topping. Most often, when we think of a pancake, we think of a syrup, a maple syrup or a pancake syrup. But pancakes are so versatile. You can put jam on them. You can put powdered sugar on them. You can eat them plain. Ron loves to put peanut butter on them for a quick snack. Sometimes if we have a sweet tooth, we will put chocolate chips in them and save them for later and eat them for like a cookie. Pancakes are also great as like a form of bread. A lot of people don't have the skill to make bread and are a little bit intimidated from it. You can make a pancake and you can add an egg next to it, or you could put a potato next to it. If you have a piece of meat, you can put that next to it. You can make pancakes in advance. It's not something you have to make every morning. You can make the batter if you want a fresh hot pancake, and you can put the batter in the refrigerator and save it for several days and cook from it. Or you can cook all those pancakes up in advance and you can put them in the refrigerator and then just warm them up either on a hot skillet or in your microwave. So this is the beginning of just a real directive series on Depression era cooking and Depression era wisdom. There are so many things that generation held, because that generation, when people went through the Depression, there were older Americans that had lived the way of life, eating the whole foods, knowing how to stretch a dollar, and making things from scratch. We had not yet entered the fast food era or the instant era that we now know in the supermarket. The other thing with the Great Depression era is there's so much application to the home economics that people are struggling with today. First off, a lot more people are at home because their jobs are gone. They've lost their jobs due to businesses closing from the pandemic, shutting down the nation. A lot of people's jobs have been reduced in hours. We have millions and millions of Americans out of work, much like the Great Depression. And everybody's just trying to figure out how to get that little extra out of the money that they have. So I hope that this is a blessing. I hope that this series will be instrumental, and we are going to cover a multitude of things in this series. But right now we're going to stick with pancakes and show you how easy it is, give you a few hints if you've never cooked one before. I know that for some of you, you're going to think, well, that's so basic. But please remember, there are so many people out there that they just don't know how to cook because they just were never taught it, and their lives have been so busy that it's the faster the food, the better. But the whole thing is to encourage you to not only help you to get your dollar to stretch, but to enjoy the meal that is before you. And you have a lot of variety with this type of base meal. And I think that's key too, is we need to look economically at a base. And a lot of things can go, if the pancake's the center of that base, a lot of things can go around it. So times are tough. And the more knowledge you have, the more you're able to confront it, the less tough it is. So we just want to be an instrument in that to help people through this time where we can. So I'm going to tell you the basic recipe because I get really bad at not putting them in the write-up. So I'm just going to tell you as we go here. My recipe is going to be bigger because I'm feeding all my guys here, but standard recipe is 2 cups of flour. Then you're going to use a tablespoon of baking powder. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but what you're going to find is if you use too much, your pancakes are going to be way too airy. So just start with a tablespoon and kind of work with your pancakes from there. A little dash of salt or a pinch of salt for every 2 cups. And then you want a sweetener. And I've used all different types of sweeteners before. I've used just plain granulated sugar like I'm going to use today. I've used maple syrup. You can use honey. I know some people use what's called stevia. I've never used it, so I imagine you could use that. Then for every 2 cups of flour, you're going to use 1 or 2 eggs. I have found I prefer 2 eggs if possible. I do not always have 2 eggs. It depends on what I've been using the eggs for prior. And again, I'm making a bigger batch, so I've got more eggs going in than you would if you're only doing 2 cups. This also refrigerates really well. I love to make this in the winter when my ice box is functional. I love to make a lot more in advance. And then I put it in the ice box, and then I've got breakfast real quick in the mornings. For 2 cups of flour, and I keep saying that over just so you know that that's the standard recipe here, you use 2 tablespoons or up to 1/4 cup, whatever you're comfortable with, of some type of fat. I use butter at times. This morning I'm going to use an organic oil that I melted down. I'm going to use our fresh goat's milk. You could use whatever milk is your favorite. Now, if you're using something that's not a dairy product, if you're using like a rice milk that's sweeter, I would probably not put the sweetener in it because I know that stuff's pretty sweet and a lot of people cook with it. So what I have found, I've made pancakes for almost 3 decades now. And I have found the way that we like them best is the batter needs to be thinner. I've made them thicker if I've run low on milk and I've accidentally put too much flour in. But your texture is totally different. So if you cook this for the first time and you think you're eating a biscuit, don't be despaired. If you like your pancakes thinner, like that would make way too thick of a pancake for me. And I'll even just put a little bit more in so you can see that even thinned out will still make too thick of a pancake for us. Now the other thing too, I like to use a batter beater. I know a lot of recipes say, oh, leave the lumps in. I do not like to have lumps in my pancake batter. I want to whip it. I want it smooth and thin. Okay, so this would still make too thick of a pancake for me. I want that pancake to be, I don't want it so thin that it, it runs off my skillet, but I want that batter to be pretty pourable. It just really affects the texture, which of course affects the taste. So the palate thing, your palate knows. So that looks like a pretty good texture. I couldn't tell you how much milk I put in it. You're just going to have to play with it. And if you've never made homemade batter for pancakes, it really is. It's finding what suits you or your family best. Now you can add at this time, if you want to add bilberries. Oh, those are so good in pancake batter to cook right up. If I'm going to add chocolate chips, if we're not going to use any type of dressing on top, I'm going to wait to add it until I put the batter on the skillet. And then I'm going to sprinkle those on top, and then I'll flip it, because otherwise it just becomes too much of a mess. One of the most important things when you cook your pancake is that your your griddle or your skillet stays at an even temperature. Now you're going to have a much easier time achieving that on your electric or gas stove, where I have to fluctuate a little bit on my wood stove depending on the fire and how it, the wood might take off or how it might cool down. So, but that's going to, when you start with a hot griddle and you start with the right temperature hot griddle, it's going to keep your butter from scorching. And you can cook your pancake in anything you want, whether it's a shortening or even a lard, any type of oil, but a butter gives it the best flavor by far. And if your griddle is too hot, that butter's going to scorch. Now that's easily, altered by turning down your heat. For me, it's moving my griddle over, and that can even happen midway through the cooking cycle as you're adding more pancakes. The other thing that I often do when I'm cooking these is I will take a cloth and I will wipe off my skillet in between the pancakes before I add more butter, because obviously that pancake, when you put it on your griddle, doesn't go all the way out to the edges of the griddle, but the butter or the oil may. And so by wiping that off in between the pancakes, you keep that that burnt oil or that overdone oil from getting onto your cakes. You're going to check your skillet. I think mine is in between heat, so I'm going to put a little butter on. Now when that butter boils, that tells me, for me personally, that it's ready. So I'm going to get it good and greased up there. I wanted to show you too, because I just went to scoop some batter up, and that batter got a little bit thicker than where I left it, which isn't uncommon for that to happen. So I'm going to add a little bit more milk to thin that back out to the texture I want, or otherwise I'm going to have too thick, too cakey of a pancake for a desire. Alright, so now that I've got the batter back where I want it, you hear that sizzle on that skillet. See how it's pushing that butter out? That's what I was talking about. When you're cooking in between, oftentimes if your griddle's getting too hot, if you just wipe that off, that'll take care of that, getting that overdone flavor. One way to tell when your pancake is ready to flip is when it starts to get drier around the edges and you start to get bubbles in the center. This is not 100% accurate, but it is probably at least 80% accurate. The other way, if you're uncertain, is to hold that up and see if it looks golden brown on the bottom. Well, we hope you enjoyed this video. Please let us know in comments below if there's something specific that you've heard about being cooked from years past that you have no idea how to do it. If you'd like some information on something else that maybe we could help you out with, and if we have the knowledge, we will be happy to share that knowledge. Also, in this up and coming series, we're going to talk about economical home cleaners, things they would have used during that time period. And we might even go ahead and cover some of the tools, the kitchen tools that they would have used when they didn't have when they were just coming into the age of electric tools such as the KitchenAid, and the electric mixer. We hope you enjoyed this video. We will see you next time. God bless.